am a 23-year-old woman, and I am half Cherokee from Georgia, USA. At the time that this story took place, my fiance and I were living on a large farm in Maryland. We didn't use the farm, but we were renting a small house on the property, and we were free to come and go around the grounds. I was only 19 at the time this took place, and the only residents in our home were myself, my fiance, and our cat and dog. Our cat was a lunatic barn cat that I'd rescued because I can't say no to animals that need help. Our farm was situated on about 20 acres of land, and our driveway was about half a mile long. Usually, when I'd get home from work, my loyal dog and I would go out for a walk, and I brought my fiance with me. Not that I was afraid to go out alone, but he spends too much time playing video games, and he uses his legs. After our driveway was a 12-mile hike, and that was through a long road with woods and farms, until it finally reconnected with civilization. It was safe to say that we were far from other people, except for our landlord, of course. The first mile was through open farmland, followed by a brief patch of forest, and then about half a mile of wheat fields. After that was solid forest for about 2 more miles. Now that you have a bit of a layout, onto the really creepy bit. It started off like any other weekday evening. My fiance and I returned home from work to our happy cottage and our happy pets. Harley, our dog, was frantic to go for a walk, so I quieted her and changed into walking clothes and asked if my fiance would join me. He had gotten home shortly after me, and he said he'd seen one of the coyotes that we have around close to the field by our house. But as you know, coyotes are mostly scavengers, especially out here, so I wasn't too worried, and I'm very capable of defending myself. I called him a baby and then told Harley that we could go down and we'd be fine without him. Laughing to myself, we left the cottage and started walking towards the driveway. The sun was going down, and the October air had started to get a chill through it, and it rustled through the cornfields next to our long driveway. The corn was about 6 feet tall at this point in the year, and impossible to see through, so I assumed my fiance was just trying to scare me, because there's no way he could have seen a coyote. Harley was enjoying her time in the field, tearing in and out of the corn stalks on her way up the driveway. I knew that as big of a coward as she was, she would alert me to any danger very quickly by running away. By the time I reached the end of the driveway, the sun had set and the moon had already come out and was shining high above the fields. It wasn't quite full, but it provided enough light that I didn't need to use my flashlight or Harley's collar light. We turned left down the road and proceeded across the first section of the field. The first field was soybeans, and if you don't know, they are relatively short plants that nothing but a rabbit could hide in, and off in the distance I spotted a few deer, but nothing alarming, so we relaxed and enjoyed our walk through the night air. I threw a stick and Harley brought it back over and over again, typical dog and owner stuff. We reached the first small section of trees, and Harley stopped and bumped into my leg, letting me know there was something ahead. It wasn't a coyote or a deer, but there was a rabbit that had been hit by a passing car, and it was still struggling. As much as I hate to say this, there was no way it was going to live, and honestly, it's probably what drew the coyotes in. I knelt down by it, and using my knife, quickly put it out of its misery, as my family had taught me, and let it pass into the next life. Feeling sad, but somewhat relieved that all we'd encountered was a handful of deer and that poor rabbit, we continued our walk and passed into the next field. This was a wheat field, and the wheat was about ready for harvest. It was quite tall and hard to see through. The field was quiet though, and Harley didn't do anything, so I figured the coyotes had passed on, if there had been any at all. Now this is the part you were waiting for. and I don't know what it was, but here it was. We rounded the corner of the field, and in an area of wheat on our left and forest on our right, the air seemed to go still. Harley got closer to me, and I heard rustling in the wheat field. I saw 3 tails circling back towards the forest. Coyotes. The eastern coyotes. They're small, but in a pack, they get pretty ballsy. Harley raised her heckles, and I yelled, "Get out of here! Go on!" as loud as I could, and the coyotes, startled, scattered off into the trees. I decided to turn around and get out of there before they decided to regroup. I'm brave, but I'm not going to walk into a darkened forest with a coyote pack and a cowardly pit bull. We turned to head back, and again, I heard a rustling in the wheat. A confused coyote? I thought it must be, but no. Harley was standing stock, still staring at the wheat, and I whistled for her to come with me. That high-pitched, ear-piercing, 2-fingered whistle that snapped her right out of it for a second when my whistle was returned from inside of the wheat. All of a sudden, all of the family legends I'd heard came flooding back to me, and I expected to see a tall, thin creature emerge, but nothing did. I didn't smell rotting meat or feel a sense of dread. Instead, I was fixed with fear and curiosity. I whistled again. The whistle was returned again. Very human sounding, but at the same time, not. Against my better judgment, I said, "Hello?" My own voice replied, "Hello?" My hand on my knife, I said, "Show yourself." Silence. No bugs, no coyotes, no Harley noises, just my own breath. Slowly the rustling started again, and I turned on my flashlight. I shined it on the wheat field, and what I saw confuses me to this day. Animal eyes, that green-yellow reflection of light was cast back at me, but what it was connected to didn't make any sense. There was a girl, no more than 14 or 16, crouched in the wheat. She wore what I must have thought was some kind of deer skin or fur, and she was naked otherwise. She was thin, and looked as though her skin had never seen sunlight. Her hair was long and tangled with wheat and leaves. Under any other circumstances, I would have said she was beautiful, but at that moment, she was terrifying. We stared at each other for what must have been a solid minute or so, but it felt much longer. And then I heard the unmistakable coyote howl from the forest. Both of our heads snapped towards the noise, and immediately I heard her take off through the wheat. At the same moment, Harley took off towards our house, and I went after her. We didn't stop running until we got to the driveway, and I stopped not wanting my fiancé to know I was running away from something. I could still hear the howling in the distance, and we started walking at a brisk pace. We made it back to the cottage with no further problems, and I didn't tell my fiancé about it. She hadn't hurt me, so I didn't think it was right to hunt her. I was awoken in the middle of the night that night by the sound of coyotes outside of our cottage. This wasn't usual, but now I wondered if she was with them. When I was coming home from work about a month later, I'd stopped obsessing about that night, and I almost thought I'd imagined it when I slammed on my brakes for something in the road. It was dark, and when my headlight hit its eyes, it reflected green and yellow. It was a large coyote, and it just stared at my car for a moment and ran off into the woods. I know this sounds crazy, but I still wonder, was that her?